Hello developers, writers, and everyone who loves game design.
Welcome to DLC Not Included, our weekly podcast where we discuss game development, the industry, and everything in between.
We're your hosts, Steele
and Teal. Glad you can join us.
It is a beautiful, if not windy day down here in South Texas.
A very rare fall day.
It has been one of those days where the power lines are whistling, and that always makes us a little nervous.
Just slightly.
We hope that each and every one of you who are listening to us, whether you be listening to us live, or listening to us on VOD, are having a fantastic day. Right now, I can hear the tower fan running, creating a nice slight white noise. I hear the rustling of the leaves outside, and occasionally, just occasionally, the neighbor's car alarm goes off across the street. Because for whatever reason, they do not know how to turn it off on a beautiful Saturday day.
Exactly. So, now that we've been talking about the different sounds of our neighborhood, let's get right into our topic.
And what are we talking about today?
Creating custom audio for your game.
All right, custom audio. So this is for all you budding audio engineers out there. By the way, and I've learned this from a friend of ours, if you can actually become a really good audio engineer, that makes you a rarity and quite marketable.
Absolutely.
But we are going to tell you that this is a high-level overview.
Right, we're not going to tell you how to create the audio. We're not going to dig into the deep dive of how-tos.
Right, because it's a very specialized skill set.
Very much.
But again, if you're going to become an audio engineer, a good way to go. But let's go over this. So a lot of you are probably listening and going, why would I want to create my audio when I can go buy sound libraries? And if you're a solo dev, it may be tempting just to buy every single sound you can get for your game.
Absolutely.
So why should you not?
But let me tell you, doing that, sound libraries cost money.
Costs.
And if you are buying a whole bunch of sounds, that money is going to add up.
Yeah, even if you're lucky enough to get things on sale or on a bundle, sooner or later, $10 here, $25 there, or $100 here, it starts to add up.
Yeah.
It costs nothing to make your own sounds other than time and experience.
Right. So, you're if you're working within a budget, and you should be working within a budget.
You really should be.
You have a sound budget.
Yeah.
So you don't want to exceed it after buying, 20 sounds.
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. Whatever your budget may be.
Right.
But another thing is that also sound libraries are restrictive.
Yes, they are. You get what you get.
You get what you get. I mean, I got this 120 sound library, and that may work for you, but does it have everything? And sooner or later, you're going to run across a sound that you need that is not, there in the library. It just doesn't exist, and that's going to cause a problem that Teal and I always preach against.
Yeah. You don't want to have to change your game around your particular sound.
Right. So you
you don't want to do that.
Yeah, you need to have like a certain rubber ball hitting a wire mesh sound. And you can't find that sound, and you can't find anything that sounds like it, so you change it from a wire mesh to a wall or something. Whatever the change is, you're changing your game to adjust for your asset. And you really don't want to do that. You don't want to do that with graphical assets. You don't want to do that with gameplay assets.
So don't do that with sound assets.
Yeah, and that's with everything really. It's like, make your own sound so that it fits the game. Make your own graphics so it fits the game. Make your own code so it fits the game.
Yeah.
Sound should never be underplayed.
Exactly.
It is an important, vital layer to your game. It is one half of the sensory experience that is primary. The primary senses, of course, for a video game being sight and sound.
Well, we're just talking about immersion.
Right. Now, touch is important, the emotions are important, all that's important, but if your game sounds like crap, it's going to be received like crap.
Yeah, it is. So please, learn to create your audio.
Yeah, and it does something else. There's a secondary effect to creating your audio. It starts to force you as a developer to think about how and why your game sounds as it does. Think of it, again, going back to the graphics, because we have a lot of graphics artists who listen to us. If you're forcing yourself to create your own art assets, you're going, hey, this is the style the game is supposed to have. Not this is what I'm going to deal with because it's what's available on the marketplace or for download. But my game looks like this style, like a Tim Burton style. So your game has a Tim Burton look to it. So you creating those visual assets, you're going, why? Why do I have the curly hill on the Nightmare Before Christmas?
Right.
Why do I have, the slightly elongated features? Why do I have this style? Well, the same thing exists for sound, for audio.
Yeah, it does.
When you start creating your own audio, you start forcing yourself to think, why does my game world sound this way? Why does Feet on Mud sound a certain way? Why does the resonance of footsteps, I'm using footsteps because it's easy to work with, in a hollowed hall sound like?
Yeah.
Why do those things sound a certain way?
So when you start really thinking about that, it gets your creative juices flowing, and you start thinking about, okay, how can I make that?
Right. So in every aspect, if you are really trying to up your dev game, if you're trying to take yourself seriously as a game dev, use tools that are available, use assets that exist. There's no reason why you can't use things that you've bought to help you.
Right.
But at a certain point, you need to create your own. So you need to be able to create that custom audio.
Right.
Now, we're going to present two different methods. And these are the two methods that we have found are the most prolific. And we're going to discuss in depth how they work, but we're not going to go so deep into the how-to that we're giving you tutorials. Remember, this is a high-level overview.
Right. So the first method, we're going to focus on the software level of generating your sound. And we call this, in the industry, we call this DAW.
Yeah, use your DAW.
Use your DAW. That's a digital audio workstation.
Yes.
Okay. And pretty much any DAW is going to work.
Right. Don't get stuck on brands. Don't get stuck on paying hundreds of dollars. The more expensive ones like FL Studio or Ableton, they're really good. They are really, really good, but you can pull it off with Audacity. In fact, you use Audacity.
I use Audacity pretty much as my go-to.
Yeah. And Teal uses it for everything from just putting little sound effects together to looping audio.
I do.
Yeah.
I have made some really good mixed battle tracks.
Yeah, so don't underestimate the free. Don't underestimate the free. Because the tool is only as good as the skill set of the person using it.
True.
Right, so you get yourself your DAW, and guys, just Google best DAWs 2021.
Yeah.
And then decide how much you want to spend.
Decide what you want to spend on it, and then get it.
Look at the features, pick it. So you get your DAW, download your DAW, and then you're going to want to get some sounds. Yeah,
and this is where you can hit up the sound libraries or websites. We recommend one, freesound.org.
That's like our go-to.
They've got a lot of really good quality sounds.
Yeah, the escape room game that we made, any sound assets were made right off of that.
Exactly.
That weren't like packaged in with the asset pack we used. We just went to freesound.org, and then the rest we fabricated using a DAW.
So you take your existing sound, slap it in your DAW, and just use this software to alter the sound, to combine it with other sounds, play with it, make it, customize it, make it unique to your game.
We're going to go over editing techniques in a little bit because, again, this is not a low-level how-to. But you want to use the DAW for various purposes to combine and alter your audio. And DAWs can do that. Any DAW worth of salt can change anything from pitch modulation to frequency to EQ. And what you do is you go with when you're using your DAW to create a sound, you could have like and and you take each of those two little different sounds I just made. You bring them into your DAW and you change them.
Yeah.
You change them until you change the frequency, you change the pitch, you change the speed, you change the EQ. You modulate it if you have to. You add a reverb or a flange or whatever you have to do with these fancy words that Steele just said that you'll understand the moment you get into a DAW. But you get in there and you change that sound.
Yeah.
And you change and you make it sound the way you want it to sound. And again, you're forcing yourself to think. What does it sound like?
Yeah. Now it forces you to think, really about the sound itself.
Right.
Let's talk about Rustling Leaves.
Yeah, what does that sound like?
What is that like?
So
and how does it change from a gentle breeze to a strong wind?
Right.
How does it change from if it's just a wind or if it's your hand going through the leaves?
Yeah, those two things are going to sound completely different because sound's generated by air moving, but what generates the sound depends on the material of what it is that's generating it. And a leaf is made of a certain material.
Mm-hmm.
That's why a leaf will sound a certain way if it's rustling against itself, it and its friend leaves, its neighbors.
Right.
With wind, that's going to sound a certain way because leaves are made of a certain material. It's also going to sound a certain way if you step on them.
Yeah, stepping on them is a different sound. Grabbing them and crunching them in your hand, that's a different sound.
So in your DAW, you could take something like, for example, a sound of somebody crinkling paper.
Yeah.
And you could use those little tools in the DAW and you could make that sound more like someone crunching leaves.
Yes, you can. And you took my example right away from me.
I'm so sorry, honey.
But yes, that is it's a technique that I've used in the past.
Right.
So
and
it works.
And it does work. But in this particular instance, the material of a leaf and the material of a paper are similar enough in properties that you can make one kind of sound like the other. And then like let's say that you're going to do this in a cathedral. Well, if your game engine doesn't have reverb, add a reverb to that.
You can do that.
It is better that your game engine handles reverb for most situations, but there's sometimes you want to add that reverb, like the demonic entity voice or something.
Ah, yes, yes.
And you want to bring out those lows and just make it reverb, so it sounds like the demonic entity speaking within the cathedral or whatever you're trying to.
Yeah.
And this is the fun part of audio engineering, of making your custom sound, is experimenting.
Yeah, and I don't want to bring up another example because I'm just so excited about this. I recently discovered it. But the splash of water, the sound water makes when you just pour it out of a bucket?
Yeah.
You can slow that down and you can loop it, modulate it, and it sounds like the ocean.
There you go. Because it's the sound of water hitting something solid.
Uh-huh.
And then you probably would add a bit of a delay between each one to make it sound like actual waves crashing. So you could do that.
Yeah.
And that's going to actually lead into our next method, which we're not going to talk about yet because I want to talk about DAWs a little bit longer.
Yes, more DAWs.
You're always going to use your DAW, by the way, regardless of your technique. But in this one, you're using sounds that already exist. And one of the best things that you can do as well with all of these DAW techniques is to take together multiple sounds.
Yeah.
And put them together.
Yeah.
To see what they sound like. In other words, sometimes a crinkling of paper, when added with a, tapping, like a ASMR tapping. I don't know if y'all could hear that. I don't know if my mic's that sensitive. Together can create a certain sound effect.
Yeah.
A certain effect. So think about it like that. When we get down to techniques, you'll see that that's actually one of the most powerful things you can do. But let's go to the next method, because when you want to talk about making sound, there's nothing in the world better than this.
Real world audio generation.
You're the audio generator.
Yep.
This is what is referred to in the industry as Foley.
Here we go. Foley.
And if method 1 and method 2 sound like they marry together really well, they do.
They do.
They really do. And an audio engineer will use whatever is available at their disposal. I mean, earlier I went, why not use your mouth? Why not use your body?
Exactly.
I mean, why would you not use 2 pork chops? Slap them against each other for a sound of something.
Oh no!
Meat thudding against other meat.
There goes our rating.
But I mean, but you could make the sound of something hitting something else. That smack sound. That sounds, that has a very definite sound.
You're banging 2 coconuts together.
Right. There's your horses.
But doing this, doing the real world sound, doing the Foley. It does require a lot of things.
It requires stuff.
A lot of stuff to make the noise.
Everything. A good Foley artist will have a collection of things that they can use. They'll also go out to like a thrift store and get stuff depending on what they're doing. Back in the day, I've known Foley artists who would have things like And I mean, this is going to sound like a joke, but have things like tin pans, rubber chickens,
Yeah.
Things that sound a certain way, that are of a certain texture and material, so they sound a certain way when they're stretched, when they're rubbed, when they're tapped against, et cetera, when they're slapped against something.
Right.
Because, again, think about the material of what you're using. It's that material that's super important, because water sounds different than water with ice.
Yep.
Rubber sounds different than marble. Everything sounds different.
Absolutely. And so,
yeah,
I'm not even sure
so yeah, it's okay, Teal. So you need a lot of things, but you also need to have a very quiet space.
You need a quiet space and a strong audio mic.
Yeah, you want to use an audio mic. And here's the difference between being an audio engineer, amateur and enthusiast, and being a real audio engineer. Is an audio engineer will have a mic that's meant for audio.
That's very, very important, because you need a sensitive mic to pick this up.
Right. That's meant specifically to pick up sound, as opposed to what we're using, which are Blue Yetis, that are meant to pick up voices or music. So make sure you get yourself that damn good mic.
Right.
So you're going to put a lot of these things together in a place where you can make these recordings, and then you're going to do pretty much what you did with Method 1, except you and the world are creating sounds.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, again, you have to look at the sound you're trying to create. And you have to replicate it with a real world thing. And sometimes you're going to create multiple pieces of audio that come together to create whatever sound it is you're trying to make. What does a laser gun sound like? No, they don't really sound like anything. Lasers don't make sounds.
Right.
The hum of the instrument that shoots out the laser, goes, but I mean, if you ever watch like a real laser in a lab, other than it being huge, they don't really make
They don't make any sound.
They don't make any sound. Laser beams don't make sound.
No.
Watch a sci-fi movie, any sci-fi movie. Watch the old Star Trek, the phasers, even those make sound.
Yeah.
Because if they just pressed a button and light came and zapped the monster, it would look pretty bad. It'd be bad.
You need a sound, so that's where all the whole pew 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 thing came from.
Yeah. And lasers sound different depending on what property. The Star Wars lasers are with a pew pew pew. That's where it came from, right? While the Star Trek phasers, the old ones went, this kind of weird sound. I was like, okay, lasers don't really sound like that, but hey, all right, it's good. And that's where you, as the audio engineer, get to have all the fun.
It's more like a zap, but yes.
Zap. But you get to have that kind of fun. What does fire sound like when fire's running across a surface? Well, I mean, if the fire's not interacting with air, it doesn't really sound like much.
It just lights up.
But that's boring as heck.
Yeah.
Steel hits the table. Poof, it's okay. I hit the table earlier.
I'm a mess today.
But that has a certain sound, though.
It does.
That has a certain sound. Fire going across an entire forest, a crackling forest fire is going to have a very definite sound. On a fuse.
On a fuse, right.
That's a sound.
Yeah, and windswept fire
sounds
is different than just fire that's just burning there.
Yeah, a campfire is not going to sound the same as a fire that's being pushed along a field by the wind. They're going to sound very different. So you, the audio engineer, got to put all that together, and you got to compose this together, and you got to record this. And sometimes you're going to record stuff that you're not sure if it's going to actually go with the final sound, because until you get into your DAW, into your mixer, you're not going to know for sure. But here's the thing. You're not losing anything more than time if you create a sound that you don't use immediately. And you may use it again.
So you're creating your own sound library.
That you can pull from.
Yep.
And since you have the ability to mix it and change it and do what you want in your DAW, you're not really losing anything. You're not really wasting anything.
That's true.
You may lose some time, but who cares?
I don't think it's a loss of time if you are adding something to your library.
Also, think of it in terms of audio versus graphics.
Yes.
A graphic artist using line art or creating a 3D model, if they get something wrong, there is a lot more that goes into fixing that. Yeah, I mean, you could say, oh, well, while they're modeling or drawing, they can hit Control-Z, and that's true, but what if they saved it?
Yeah.
Hopefully the graphics artist has layers in their Photoshop or Illustrator graphic or whatnot. Hopefully the 3D modeler has several iterations of that model, but any fixes on either one of those mediums are going to take a bit of time, I say in air quotes. It's work.
Yeah.
an audio engineer, if you have to recreate a sound, that's not as much time.
It's not.
I'm not saying it's easy. It's actually very hard to make good sound. But you're not looking at the same time commitment.
Right.
So it's okay if you make a sound and it doesn't work, because then you can go back into your audio studio or wherever it is you're making your audio and make it again.
Yep.
The TV show pilot that I worked on a few years ago, their audio engineer used this quiet room that had old server equipment that was just decommissioned. It wasn't being used anymore, but it was quiet. Mm-hmm. The walls were just the right material that it didn't reverb or soak up the sound too much. Mm-hmm. And they would do stuff like just turn everything off and use like slippers to make footsteps and stuff like that. And it was a small production, so they used what they could. But I mean, that's what an audio engineer does. You use what you have your hands on. And before we move on, that is the quintessential part of being anything in a game developer, whether it's graphics or audio, is use what you have at your disposal and let your imagination kind of guide you, because a person doesn't know what a black hole sounds like.
No.
We don't know what the radiating energy waves coming from the Triforce sounds like. So if you're going to sit there and go driving yourself crazy trying to create the perfect sound, you're going to drive yourself insane. And the reason that we're trying not to laugh is because our neighbor
just decided to fire up his chainsaw.
Just firing it up. So while Bupkis is chainsawing and the car alarm is going off, Teal and I are struggling to give you a very good dissertation on audio.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and wrap that up, and then we'll move on. Guys, most players don't know what a thing sounds like, so use your imagination and let the combination of your sound and your graphics and your gameplay guide them into believing that that's how it should sound. There.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Now let's quickly touch upon editing techniques before Bupkis decides to fire up his helicopter.
By the way, guys, you absolutely should be combining method 1 and method 2.
Yeah.
Really, really, really should. So combine your audio libraries, your freesound.orgs with your Foleys, pull it all together. There are people far better than us who can teach you how to edit sound. Google it. Just go onto YouTube and say sound editing techniques.
Yep.
Audio engineering for games, and
if you really want to do a deep dive and really want to jump into it, in a Demi course.
100%. That chainsaw is going at full speed. Okay, so
it's okay.
So we're going to talk about three specific techniques.
Yeah, these are just the specific editing techniques that you'll most commonly use.
Yeah, we do like using these the most, and any audio engineer worth of salt will be using these. Go ahead.
Okay, the first one is shifting your pitch. Shift the pitch of that sound. You can make it completely different just by changing the pitch.
Yeah. So again, we'll go with the sound or the tappity tap of my fingers against my my coffee glass, my coffee mug. Mm-hmm. So if you lower the pitch of that and lower the speed and make it lower and slower, it's going to sound significantly different than it does normally. Same thing if you bring it all the way up. Faster.
So I have an example, and this is something that I discovered years ago.
Okay, what you got?
Is whale song. An audio engineer, took whale song and raised the pitch and the speed of it, and it sounded like birds chirping.
Oh, I did not know that.
It was birds chirping.
Oh, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but then again, that's the magic of sound.
Yes.
So pitch modulation, pitch changing is super duper important.
But there's another one too.
What's the other one?
Okay, adjusting the curve of your various frequencies.
Okay. So all you EQ artists are going to know what we're talking about. Yeah.
Yes.
Bring your lows up and down. Bring your highs up and down. Bring your lows up and your highs down.
Move your middle.
Move your middle. Yeah. In fact, if you're ever going to do any audio engineering that includes speech, get really used to that middle range.
That middle range, man.
Mm-hmm. You can also, side note, you can also use EQ to clean up audio, to clean up your vocal audio.
Yes, you can.
If anyone ever has that tinny sound of their voice, like I do sometimes.
We've never adjusted the curve of our ever.
But yeah, change those curves. A good example is if I'm talking right now into this microphone,
which you are,
and I thank you,
uh-huh,
and I bring it into an EQ, and I take all the lows down, I am gonna sound like the Tin Man.
Yes, you are. It's awesome.
Like I'm inside of a tin costume. It's going to sound really strange, but it's also going to sound very different than how I normally sound because I have a very bass-driven voice, even though I'm a baritone.
Yeah.
And
tell him what you did to my voice.
Oh, go on.
I sounded like King Xerxes.
Yes, she did.
He made me sound like Xerxes.
Yeah, to kind of experiment with it, we brought her high frequencies down, raised up her lower frequencies, and we're not talking like a hardcore cliff here. We're talking like a gradient.
Yeah.
And she sounded like she was a generous god. I mean, it was hilarious. Now, granted, we normally have deeper voices. I'm a deeper baritone, Teal's an alto.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that we can't make ourselves sound completely freaking different.
Of course. So yeah.
Yeah, and then the last one is this is the magic. This is where you guys can really do some crazy stuff once you learn how sound works. That's layering. You
can layer multiple singular sounds.
Yeah.
Into one combined sound.
And that's where that Audacity makes Audacity a DAW.
Yes.
Among other things, is that you can easily layer with Audacity.
Yes, you can.
So create 3 or 4 layers and layer 2, 3, 4 sounds on top of each other. They're going to sound different. So sound A, sound B. Layer sound A on top of sound B. The resulting sound will sound not like A or B, but something new.
Mm-hmm.
Because once again, sound is something that is fluid. It's liquid. It's liquid. It's something that, depending on what you do to it, can change the context of what it can be attached to.
So, for example, and you guys have seen this on your 8-hour ASMRs,
yeah,
where you have a crackling fireplace in the room and the sound of raindrops pattering against the window.
The two of those together are at a good frequency, layered on top of each other to create a certain effect.
Yeah.
But let's go in a different direction. Let's say you create a bit of a white noise frequency, a bit of a, really low night noise frequency.
Yeah.
And occasionally something that sounds like pipes grating against pipe, like metal grating against metal, slowly. That's going to create tension. That's going to create nervousness and anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
The true magic of an audio engineer is also being able to use frequencies to elicit certain emotions and feelings way outside of the context of this podcast.
Yeah.
There are people, like I said, much better at this than Teal and I. And go on the internet. Go on YouTube. YouTube the psychology of sound.
Yeah.
Different sounds, depending on different contexts, can elicit different emotions.
And here we are, we're in the Halloween season. Yeah. So go look at a clip of Freddy Krueger in the first Nightmare movie. Yeah. Go look at the clip where he is walking along where the pipes are and he drags his knife fingers over the pipes. Just look at that clip. And think about the different sounds that are in that clip.
And that's an old school horror movie. And they knew what they were doing back then. So what you're going to want to do is, regardless of what editing technique you use, regardless of what method you use, regardless of what software you use, et cetera, it keeps going back to the most important thing. You, the audio engineer, you, the developer, have to think about what your world sounds like and then replicate it. And like everything in game development, if you want to do it right, it takes time.
So don't be afraid to get in there and experiment. Create different files.
And instead of thinking, this is going to add more time to the development of my project, instead of thinking about that, because that's going to turn you off or make you rush and make mistakes, think about, how can I, creating my own sound, make my game even better?
Yeah, and on the same token, how can I build my library? Because hopefully you're going to be making more than one game.
Yeah, every one of you should be. Multiple games. So now it's time for us to take questions from our live audience.
And if you've been watching, remember to use the podcast question feature in our chat.
That's right. And while we wait to see if our beloved live audience has any questions for us, we actually held it together really well. There's a couple of times you probably heard us stumble, and the reason is because our neighbor is going full-on chainsaw I'm not sure what tree he's chainsawing at this point.
He has chainsawed just about every single tree on his property. I'm wondering what it is he's chainsawing at this point.
Maybe he's making a sculpture with chainsaws.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
But yeah, sound is often over understated by people who are just getting into it. Get a game dev, it's like, hey, I'm going to be a game dev. I'm just going to use this sound library.
You don't think about sound until you start getting into it.
Yeah.
And you're going to become very aware of sound.
Very quickly. Very quickly. Also, people who take audio engineering seriously for their game, whether it be something they do on their own, which is fine for a solo dev, or actually have a qualified audio engineer helping them, those games are going to be noticed as being considerably more professional looking and sounding. They're just going to sound better. If you take a sound library, I'm going to go ahead and pick on one of our beloved communities. If you're an RPG Maker developer and you're using what comes with RPG Maker MZ and you only use that, your project's going to look and sound like an RPG Maker game that everyone else makes.
Exactly.
The moment you start using your own sound, sound that you get from an audio library, sound that you fabricate, your game is no longer going to look like just another RPG Maker game. If you're making a game in Unreal using something like the horror engine or one of the turn-based engines, and you only use the sound supplied with the sample project, your game is going to sound like it's made in the horror engine.
Exactly.
Or that turn-based engine. It's not going to sound like anything other than just another sample. The moment you start creating your own audio, it's going to sound like your game.
And that's what you want. Now we have a question.
Okay.
This is from KV. He asks, what about thematic symmetry? You talked about realistic sounds, but would that sound good in a cartoony, jokey game? Okay,
very good question, KV, and thank you so much. Again, people don't know what a cartoon mallet on a cartoon coyote sounds like. We don't know what that sounds like. So yes, even for a jokey, cartoony game, even for a wacky races game, if you want to go full on Laugh Olympics, what does, remember, those old cartoons had a certain sound.
Yeah, they
profile. They sounded a certain way. Go back and watch the old Laugh Olympics, the old Yogi Bear cartoons. Go watch the old Bugs Bunny cartoons. Listen to those.
Yeah.
Use the whole where like somebody uses a pole vault to jump over a fence and it goes, that sounds a certain way. So you have to figure out the sound that you want your game to sound like. And then you use things to create that. Layer it together.
Hey, a slide whistle.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's pretty simple.
Yeah. So again, look at that. A really good example would be, like let's say you have a game, serious or not serious, and you have a comedic moment where a character looks out from behind a wall, and then goes back into the wall. That kind of cartoony moment. You could actually have that slide whistle go, and have that kind of sound. Apologies for whistling into the mic, everyone, but, you could do that. So again, it's more about you as the developer thinking about how you want your game to sound and then finding a way to replicate that or fabricate that.
That's right.
Than it is about, does that work? Because if it's sound, it works.
Yeah.
All right, good question, though.
That's a very good question. Yeah. We got another question. This is from Burke.
All right.
What are your thoughts on the use of not just the sound itself, but frequency alteration to help induce an emotion, like infrasound under 25 hertz to induce dread, or higher frequency sounds to generate unease and approach to thresholds of pain? Also, take advantage of those chainsaw sounds in post for your next horror game. Thank you. Yes.
First off, and I don't think Burke means it like this, but don't use sounds to elicit physical pain in your in your gamers, in your players. There was a game that we actually played for the Vive, and it's a little demo called what's it called? Shattered Lights.
Yeah.
And in Shattered Lights, you're exploring some facility that has like an SCP in it or something. But they have this kind of metal grating sound in the background, and it's just at the right volume and frequency that if you have sensitive ears, it actually can hurt. It actually hurt Fox's ears when she was playing, and she had to lift the Vive headset off her ears. So this is a side note, and I know Burke doesn't mean that, but please don't hurt your players.
Yeah.
Don't use a play.
Yeah, please don't do that.
Don't use a sound that could actually cause someone with sensitive hearing harm, because you don't know if your player's going to have sensitive hearing.
Mm-hmm.
But Burke brings up a very good question, and there's games that do that. Our favorite go-to horror game, Phasmophobia, uses a low-frequency sound to give for 2 reasons. One, you entered into you've crossed the threshold into the area where the ghost can kill you.
Yes.
When that infrasound is playing, that low-frequency sound. 2, it does actually create unease. It creates a sense of unease. You really should use frequency alterations to induce emotions.
Right. I'm thinking about in Silent Hill.
Oh, yeah.
There's a higher frequency sound that simulates the metal scraping against metal.
Like when a pyramid head's getting closer.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's a very noticeable sound that that induces a very direct feeling into the player.
Exactly.
But yeah, use sound frequency and study up on it. That is an audio engineering topic that's beyond the scope of this, but to kind of guide you guys in the right direction, Google and research the psychology of sound.
Yeah.
Find the frequencies that induce unease, anguish, dread,
anxiety,
and use those against your player. You do want to use your audio to induce emotions in your player and to make your environments feel more alive. So if you can use that through frequency alteration, that's really good.
Absolutely. Use every tool at your disposal.
Every tool. Pardon me. So if we don't have any other questions, we'll give them another minute. What type of audio do you like to work on, Teal?
I actually like to work with natural sound. Wind and rain, leaves. Leaves are one of my favorites.
Things that occur in nature itself.
Yeah. I like to work with nature sounds.
Yeah, my favorite type of sounds that Teal makes are stuff like things that sound like they come like in a tropical forest or a rainforest, a waterfall generation, that kind of thing.
I love all the waterfall stuff.
And a waterfall would be several layers. It would be first you'd have the sound of the water coming down, hitting the rocks as it comes down, which is a roar because it's a great volume of water. Then there's the sound of it actually hitting the basin. So that's going to sound different because water sounds different if it's hitting a shallow as opposed to a deep. So you layer on your sounds like that.
Yeah.
You could have the sounds of the spray actually hitting leaves nearby. So, you got to think about those kind of things.
Yes, you do. There's a lot. And it forces you to think about what's going on to make that sound. What all is happening.
The sounds that I'm more interested in are more like sounds that exist on a higher fantasy element. Like, what does a magic circle sound like when it's activating?
There you go. Yeah.
What does a fireball sound like as it goes by? that kind of thing. That's the stuff that fascinates me. So I don't think we have any more questions at this time. That is good. For you budding audio engineers out there, just remember, practice makes perfect. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. There's no file that you can make there's no audio file you can make that's going to make your game files corrupt.
Exactly.
So please, by all means, have fun. Have fun with it.
Yeah.
And in the end, it's all part of the journey.
You're going to become much more aware of sound, and it's going to make you a better immersive developer. I love that word, immersive.
And speaking of immersion, the chainsawing has stopped, so now we can actually have a podcast without sound in the background.
I think he took his beer break.
I think he did. All right. We want to give a thanks to everyone who's listening. You guys have made season 2 of DLC Not Included absolutely amazing. Our live audience, you guys are the best with great questions. We always go back after and read the actual chat, so we're sure there's going to be jokes in there that's going to make us giggle. But
we also address your questions offline. So if you have a question and you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Tunes or that sort of thing, iTunes, then hit us up.
Yeah. So for all of you out there who are listening to us on VOD, whether it be Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Amazon Music, etc., thank you as well. We do track our analytics. We do watch you guys, and we're grateful for the views.
Yeah.
All right. So we love each and every one of you. Please remember, never give up. Okay? Don't give up. Practice and perseverance are the most important thing. Practice and perseverance provides perfection.
There you go. Now you need all your P's. We have to edit all out all those P sounds.
Yes. So anyway, join us next time on DLC Not Included, and remember,
anyone can give you the key, but you have to go through the door.